and it starts to drop away, you just have to holler at me and remind me.
Okay.
To move the mic back up closer. My name's Steve, my wife Kara, we have 5 kids. We met you guys last year about the same time. I think it was a little earlier in the year. But it's so good to be back and to see familiar faces, to reconnect with you guys. So we're excited to be back here to worship with you guys this morning. We are the directors at Victory Center. Last year we shadowed Ken and Karen Taves. This year we are the director, and so it's got a little bit more stress involved because now that we're the ones in charge. And so it's been good. It's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot more work than we originally anticipated. And so it's been a fun journey trying to balance life, family, work, along with the camp, and to do all these things. But we're having fun doing it.
Amen.
And so it's as draining as it is, it still is exciting for us. And so we're very, very excited for camp this summer. And so as I was planning through camp and thinking over it, and what am I going to say to churches to try to entice kids or families to send their students to camp? What is it about Victory Center that I love? And so as I was thinking about it, as I was going through, I really came up with 3 points on why I think Victory Center is unique and why we love Victory Center. And so I'm just going to share those with you, and then we're going to jump right into the message. It's all going to tie together, I hope, as well as it does in my own brain. But the first reason we love Victory Center is its centeredness around Christ. Centeredness around teaching what the Bible has to say. Me and Kara had this opportunity back in the end of January to go to Minnesota and attend a Christian camp conference. While we were there, we met a bunch of other camp directors, both very big camps and smaller camps like ours. And the one thing that just really stood out to me is a lot of these camps were going away from some of these Bible memory passage times. They were going away from cabin devotion times. They were stepping away from some of these other Bible teaching times and going to great big fun games or a rock wall or a zip line. And as cool as those things are, the way that they fit it in their schedule was by cutting out the very reason the camp began. And so one of the reasons I love Victory Center is because it is still centered around the Bible. And I'm not saying the other camps are bad. I just like how focused Victory Center is. And it is our goal to continue keeping it that focused on teaching the Bible. The second reason I love Victory Center is there's no cell service. And so you get kids walking into campus, they pull out their phone, and you can see the fear come over their eyes. And so you've got to go up to the very top of the hill where there's just maybe one bar. You can send that one text real fast. There are a couple buildings where we do have cell service just for emergencies or to be able to do research and things like that. We can get online where we need to. But for the most part, and to the campers, the internet, the cell service is not there. And so it forces them to be engaged with what's around them. And what we put around them is the Bible. That's what we put around them. So that's another reason we love Victory Center. The third is kind of a unique point, and that is that our staff, and all of our staff, is support-based. And so we've got summer missionaries, older high schoolers, college-age students. There's a couple that are teachers. They come back and choose to serve at Victory Center all summer long as cabin leaders. They do this without a guarantee of a paycheck because they've signed up to serve this way and to raise their funds. And so our program director, Kara, and I, and all of our summer missionaries, we're all the same in the fact that it's support-based. And I think that's a unique thing because we have said we're going to go serve, and God will take care of us.
Amen.
And we're willing to leave it at that. And so I think that's just a unique thing. We don't have the staff that's just there for the fun or just to collect the paycheck. And so those are my 3 points on why I love Victory Center, and I think Victory Center stands out. And so I can't read that clock very well, but what time do I need to be done?
Actually, the clock's wrong anyway, so just...
You go till you're done.
Okay.
Yep.
Start waving your hands if I'm going over.
Nah.
Okay.
And if we go short, we'll have to...
We're comfortable. Don't worry about it.
Wherever God leads you.
Perfect. So we have thoroughly enjoyed planning camp this summer. There are still some things we're looking for. That's volunteers to come serve in the kitchen during the week of camp. Hungry campers are not very fun campers, or not very engaged campers, so we need to be able to feed them. Our cook does an amazing job, so we need helpers to help out in the kitchen. We also have a work day coming up. It's in May 18th through the 20th. You can come for a day, you can come for the whole weekend, you can come for an hour. Basically what we're doing there is we're cleaning the grounds, building things that need to be built so that when campers come a couple weeks after that, our camp is set up and ready. And so if you would like to volunteer, we'd love to talk to you about that, what it would look like, and then come have you serve alongside of us this summer. We are finding that planning of camp is taking a whole lot more than we had thought. One of the things that is taking a whole lot more than we thought is finding those cabin leaders, finding the summer missionaries. And so it was back in December. We had picked out our theme. We had designed the shirts. We had sent them off to the printer or whatever, whoever makes the shirts. And so we've gotten a lot of that done. We're excited. And so we start contacting our summer missionaries from last year. Hey, are you coming back to serve with us? We got a lot of yeses, which was really exciting. But we got a handful of no. I'm graduating college. I have to start working at a real job, which then kind of hurt me because camp is a job. But I'll save that for later. Some were getting married. And there were a lot of different reasons they wouldn't be coming back. So then we had to figure out, well, who's going to take their place? How are we going to fill these cabins with cabin leaders? And so we started reaching out to others that we knew, others that had been to camp, others that had gone through training in the camp. And we're reaching out, and we had 2 or 3 spots that we didn't have anybody for. We didn't have any idea of who to even contact again about this position. So we were sitting there, and I remember praying, God, I know you're going to bring people to us. I know you're going to fill the camp positions, but I don't know how. And I don't know who I'm supposed to reach out to for this. And so we continue to pray, and I remember sitting there thinking like, man, it'd be really nice to know what God was doing right now. Like, whose heart is he working on? Because that's what we were praying for, is that God would stir in the heart of those he was calling to serve at camp. And so, man, it'd be really nice, because then I could also talk to him. You know, I could help God out in this way. But we just had to sit, and we had to wait. And so this thought of, man, what's God doing right now? I'm working. What's God doing? And so that brings us into our passage today. We're going to John chapter 11. And so hold on to this thought, like, what's God doing right now? And then at the very end, we'll come back to it. So John chapter 11. I'm a page too far. It's the story of Lazarus. A lot of you know about Lazarus. Lazarus was the brother to Mary and Martha. Martha and Mary. It was Mary who washed the feet of Jesus. It was the 3 siblings. They knew Jesus. They were close friends with Jesus. And so if you start, a certain man was sick, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and his sister Martha. It was Mary who anointed the Lord with the ointment and wiped his feet. Verse 3, still in verse 2. Lazarus was sick. He's about to die. He is not doing well. So his sisters sent word to Jesus. Jesus was in Jerusalem. And Bethany is about 2 miles away. Okay, so it's not like they have to hop on a horse and ride for 40 days to get to Jesus to make sure he gets back in time. Like, this was a short distance. This was not uncommon for people to walk. And so Lazarus is sick. He's not doing well. They're afraid he's going to die. So Mary and Martha send word to go get Jesus. Verse 6 is where it really starts to turn. Verse 6 says, so when he heard that he was sick, that's Lazarus was sick, he then stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. He stayed 2 days longer. Bethany was about 2 miles away from Jerusalem, where Jesus was. That 2 miles could be traveled in about 40 minutes if you're walking averagely. Okay? Now, who would be along with me that if my good friend is sick and in a hospital, and I go out to start my car and it's dead, and the only way I can get there is by foot, I still could walk faster than 40 minutes to get to him, right? I've got a close friend, sick, about to die. Jesus doesn't start walking right away. He doesn't send people in his place right away. It says he waited there 2 days longer in the place where he was. So my first point today would be that even when it seems like God is doing nothing, I've got to find it on my page. When God seems to be doing nothing, he may be doing more than we could ever imagine. And that's exactly what's happening here. It's exactly what was happening in Karen and I's story of finding this summer missionary. And so God could be doing more than we could ever imagine. And so if you keep walking through there, down, got to find my notes. Yes, he stayed 2 days longer. The delay that Jesus stayed for 2 days didn't cause Lazarus to die. Jesus would have known that Lazarus probably, for the sake of the timeline, probably died shortly after they sent the messenger to find Jesus. And so that by the time the messenger already got to Jesus, he had already passed away. And so let's play with this just for a minute from Mary and Martha's point of view, right? And so you wake up, you go say hi to your brother, and you find that he's not doing well. So you try to give him a little bit of medicine, help him out, make him feel better, but he's not getting any better. And in fact, he's taking a turn for the worse really, really quickly. And now you're starting to really get worried about him. So you decide, I'm going to send a messenger to the one guy that we know that could heal him. That's what we're going to do. We're going to send help. Shortly after you send for that help, they pass away. So now you've got the grief, the sorrow of losing a loved one weighing you down all day. And you know that Jerusalem's only 40 miles or 40-minute walk away. So you wait, and you wait. And you're eagerly waiting because you know that when Jesus gets here, he can make it all better. He can make the hurt go away. But he doesn't come. So you go to sleep, you wake up the next morning, you go check. Yep, it wasn't a dream, this was actually real life. The pain hits you again. You start planning funeral arrangements. You're going through all of this heartache all day long, eagerly awaiting, right? You're checking out the window. Maybe Jesus is coming now. Maybe he'll, if I look out, I'll see him walking down the driveway now. It doesn't happen. That day passes, the next day comes, right? This is the second day. Jesus waited there 2 days. This is the second day of the same thing. Doesn't come. Eagerly awaiting. And so you've got to imagine, they've got to be wondering, what is so important that Jesus doesn't drop what he's doing and come serve my needs right now? Why doesn't he come serve us? Because this is life and death. But then there's also the thought of, is there anything Jesus can still do? Which we'll get into later with their questioning. And so this is hardship. This is a hard place for Mary and Martha to be. And so my second point would be sometimes we have to experience these hardships. We have to experience heartache to come out at the end to really see what the glory of God can look like. Right? So verse 7, Jesus finally says, okay guys, we've waited here long enough. It's time to go. It actually says, then after he said to the disciples, let us go to Judea again. The disciples said to him, Rabbi, the Jews were just now seeking to stone you, and you are going there again? They were ran out of there previously. They're looking to kill Jesus. Jesus said, let's go back. The disciples were like, hold on. It's not safe there. If we go, we could die. This isn't a joke. Let's think about this for a minute, Jesus. Jesus then answers them in a really cool way, really deep, but really simple all at the same time, right? Jesus answered, this is verse 9. Jesus answered, are there not 12 hours in a day? If anybody walks in the day, he does not stumble because he sees the light of the world. But if anybody walks in the night, he stumbles because the light is not in him. What Jesus is saying is, have you guys ever heard the saying, you got to work while the light shines? Right? I do construction, and so that's a pretty big saying from what I've heard growing up. And so if there's daylight outside, you're working. You're trying to get as much done in those summer months that you can, because that means you don't have to be outside in the winter when it's dark, right? So this is kind of what Jesus is saying on the light side of it. The deeper side is Jesus is talking about the daylight being his ministry and the darkness being after his ministry, right? It's a really cool study to go through and look at the life of Jesus and see all the times where he enters this dangerous situation where we would call it dangerous, but Jesus walks out of there. And the phrase that because it had not or was not yet his time is right behind it. And so Jesus knew he would be safe because his time had not yet come. So Jesus knew these things. He's saying, while I'm here, while we're doing work, while it's time to do work, we'll be safe. Let's go. I love how, verse 15, I skipped over verse 15 and I don't want to do that. Verse 15 kind of opens up a hard truth that Jesus says to these disciples. Right? Verse 15, he says, I am glad for your sakes that I was not there so that you may believe. Ouch. Right? Did he just really say that he was glad Lazarus had to pass away? Is that what's really going on? And Jesus knows what's going on. Right before that, the disciples really didn't want to go, and they started playing with Jesus' words. Jesus had mentioned that he was asleep. So the disciples, well, if he's asleep, then we don't really have to go. He'll wake up on his own. He doesn't really need our help. He doesn't need your help. We could just skip it. That's where Jesus says he actually is has died. That's verse 14. Jesus, the Lord, said to them plainly, Lazarus is dead. And I am glad for your sakes that I was not there so that you may believe. Jesus has something way greater planned for this. But for the disciples, this is totally bizarre, isn't it? For Mary and Martha, this is hard. This is hard. So verse 16, I love the straight shooting of Thomas. Jesus has said, we're going. There's no question about this. And Thomas says, you know what? Thomas said to his fellow disciples, let us also go that we may die with him. You know what? If we go, we're going to die. He's going. We might as well make it our end too. Right? I could just see there's so many different ways Thomas could have said this. But he says it as plainly as he could. And pretty sure we're going to die. Let's go. And so it's cool to see the following, the willingness to follow Jesus that the disciples had, even though it was in the face of perceived danger. And so we get to the time Jesus has walked the 40 minutes, the 2 miles to get there. And he comes to a place in verse 18. In 20. Martha, therefore, when she heard that Jesus was coming, went to meet him. But Mary had stayed at the house. Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. This is a blaming of Jesus, right? And not because of you he's gone. It's the absence of him not being there to be able to make him well was the blame. That it wasn't the blame that Jesus killed him, but rather the fact that Jesus didn't prevent it. Okay? That's the blaming that Martha has on Jesus. And so Jesus goes very deep with Martha and very simply in response to her. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Very clearly, if Martha's listening and asking questions, maybe she would have caught that Jesus was talking about rise again on earth. But she didn't. She assumed she knew the answer, and so she responded right away. Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day. And so Jesus also replies, said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live even if he dies. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? And she answered, yes, Lord, I have believed that you are the Christ, the Son of God, he who comes into the world. So she's got all the right answers. She knows who Jesus is. She believes who Jesus is. But yet she was still upset. God didn't work things out in her timing, in her way. Right? So right after that, Mary's the one that washed Jesus' feet, right? Mary comes out and says almost the same exact thing to him. In verse 28, she called to Mary. She heard, she got up quickly and was coming to him. Verse 30, now Jesus had not yet come into the village, but was still in the place where Martha had met him. And when the Jews who were with her in the house and consoling her, when they saw that Mary got up quickly and went out, they followed her, supposing that she was going to the tomb to weep there. So Mary, this is still raw. This is still hurting. Therefore, when Mary came to where Jesus was, she saw him and fell at his feet. This is a sign of worship. This is not someone who doesn't know who Jesus is. This is someone who knows intimately who Jesus is. She's worshiping, falling at his feet. Okay? Saying to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. God, if you would have worked in my timing, I wouldn't have this heartache. I wouldn't have had to go through the stress of planning out these last few days. Right? And so, the conversation is very similar to that of Martha's, but it doesn't go deep. She kind of ends it there. Jesus immediately asks where Lazarus is. That is in 33, where Jesus therefore saw her weeping, and the Jews came with her also weeping. He was deeply moved in the spirit and was troubled. And then he said, where have you laid him? Jesus wants to know where Lazarus is. And then the most famous verse in all of the Bible for every young man everywhere, because it's the shortest, Jesus wept. Right? That's verse 35. Jesus wept. And now this weeping isn't a cry of sorrow for Lazarus. This is sorrow because these guys are living in a sin-cursed world. Let me find it in my notes because that is the best way I have written it. Verse 30 is, this verse is very critical. Jesus' tears were not of mourning for Lazarus, but out of grief for a fallen world. Entangled in sin caused sorrow and death. And the sin cause goes all the way back to Adam in the original sin, because all those things come from that. And so he's sorrowful that we live in a fallen world. And he sees the heartbreak, he sees the hurt, and he's moved, and so he weeps. And so it's really cool because it also shows that Jesus has emotion and that he cares, right? And so I love that verse, even as short as it is, but it's so impactful and so big when you unpack it. But verse 39, Jesus asks to see the tomb. Martha says, it's too late. He's been in there for 4 days. And this is a farming community. And so, how long does it take for a cow to start really stinking after it's died?
Not long.
Hour, 2 hours?
Yes, up right away.
Pretty quick, right?
Yeah.
It, imagine 4 days. I'm sure some of you have experienced that maybe. 4 days. That's a long time. And see, back in Jewish culture, they wouldn't embalm bodies after they had died. They would wrap them very loosely in linen and then soak them in spices and oils to try to combat the horrible, horrible odor that comes from decomposition. And so they would wrap the head separately, then the body. And it's just these spices and oils, and we all know how well some of those things work, or the lack of working that they have sometimes, right? And so Jesus says, I want to see in the tomb. I want to see where he's laid. Martha says, we don't want to. We don't want to be exposed to what's in there right now. You missed your chance, God. And so he recounts a conversation that he had earlier with her. In verse 40, you can see the argument in verse 41. Jesus said, move the stone, and Jesus raised his eyes and said to the Father, that's Jesus praying, not of petition to Jesus, but out of praise, that he would be healed. 43, and when he said these things, he cried out with a loud voice to Lazarus, come forth. So my last point is, life is better in the light with Christ. Okay? But I want to look at this up until this point from Lazarus' point of view now. You wake up, got a little itch in your throat. Don't think anything of it. Go to bed that night, it's gotten worse. The next day, it's just a little bit worse. The next day, it's just progressing. Nothing you're doing's helping. You let your family know. They start to get worried. And then they watch you start to decline very, very quickly. Then you watch them get so nervous that they send for help for Jesus. And so now you're thinking, well, this must really be serious now if they're sending for Jesus. And then the next thing you know, you wake up in this dark room. You're laying down. There's something wrapped around your head. And there's this horrible odor. And so you hear this call out. And you're like, oh, wait, that's Jesus. So first you got to, unwrap your face. You sit up. There's a little bit of light because the stone's rolled away and you're looking around. And now you realize the horrible stench is coming from yourself. There's nobody else in there, right? It's just you. And you hear this come out of the tomb. So now Lazarus has a choice to make. Lazarus can step out into the light, or he can remain in the tomb, right? Why would he remain in the tomb? Well, that's a good question. Because in the tomb represents sin. It represents brokenness. The stink of what sin creates. Right? There was no death before sin. And so I'm not saying Lazarus got sick because of sin. But there's sickness in the world because of sin. And so in the tomb, it represents all of this. Lazarus could comfortably sit in the tomb and say, you know what? I don't want to expose my family to this, to the yuck, to the pain, to what's in here. I could just stay. Or he could leave. I'm sure the thoughts had gone around in Lazarus' mind. The thought of, what are people going to say when I walk out of here? Is it going to be like coming home from a vacation? Like, oh man, we're glad to have you back, but dude, go take a shower, please. What's the conversation like, right? It could be, you don't know what the rumblings are. And so Lazarus he's risking the unknown. He's risking not knowing how people are going to respond to step into the light with Christ. And so, it's in verse 45, or verse 44, Lazarus steps out. He steps out into the light. Everybody sees he's raised. I'm sure Mary and Martha were so glad, like words probably couldn't even express what they were feeling to have their brother back. But I wonder if they had any thoughts, thinking back when they were talking to Jesus, like, oh, he said that, I just didn't listen. Oh, he mentioned this, I just didn't catch it. Or if they never even recounted conversations at all. I don't know. I know myself, I would be trying to think back, like, how could I have known that this was going to happen? But then in verse 45, it kind of sums up the entire reason for this to happen. It actually was said earlier in verse 15, I think. All of this was going to happen to bring out the glory of God. 45 is kind of your sub-main point. Therefore, many of the Jews who came to Mary and saw what Jesus had done believed in him. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them the things which Jesus had done. Which basically is saying some believed, others didn't. And they didn't just like not believe and not care. They didn't believe and wanted Jesus gone. Right? This was one of the final straws for the Pharisees to really start going after Jesus hard and trying to eliminate him. And so the whole point was to show the glory of God so that the people would believe, right? That's the reason for the story. And so that brings me back to us looking for cabin leaders. I'm like, well, Steve, how do they compare? Like, looking for a cabin leader is not similar to death. And I would agree. It's definitely not as dramatic as losing a loved one. But I think there are some similarities in what Mary and Martha would have been going through and thinking about what's God doing at this time. How is this working? And so just a couple questions for you. How have you guys experienced God working in your life? Because God is working all around us. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It could be simple. It could be finding summer missionaries. It could be a number of different things. And so for Kara and I, we've been praying for summer missionaries. We've been praying that God directs the hearts of these young people, young adults, I guess they are. I want to call them kids, but they're not kids. They're young adults. We've been praying that God would work in the heart of these young adults and bring them to camp, if that's God's will. And if God does not desire them to be at camp, that he would close that door on that person and that they would choose to go a different way, right? And so we're praying, and we opened up registration on March 1st for camper registration. Year to date right now, we have 370 reservations for campers to come to camp.
Praise God.
That is an awesome thing. Day one, it was so cool to be able to sit there on the computer and watch these come in. And they were coming in really fast. It was exciting. We just watched the numbers grow. At the same time that was exciting, the realization hit that I did not have enough cabin leaders to fill the cabins that I was accepting reservations for those campers. that meant that if camp was to start to that day, I wouldn't have enough staff to house all those kids. And so it was a time of, God, I know you've got a plan. You're bringing the campers here. I know you've got a plan. It'd be nice to know what it is, right? This could save me a whole lot of stress. This could save me a whole lot of heartache. If you just let me know what it is. So all day long, we got to like 200, close to 170 something, I think, that first day. And we're sitting there, and we're just scratching our heads because we realized we don't have enough staff. And this could go horrible this summer. This could end in a train wreck. What are we going to do? Who are we going to call to come serve for a week as a cabin leader? And so that's when we got a text. This young lady said that she was in. And that's all the text said. She said, I'm in. Awesome. We're so excited to have you on board. And so the March 1st was the deadline for the early bird special for our staff. The early bird is they get a t-shirt for free. We try to encourage them to get their applications in early so I don't have that stressful day of wondering who our staff is going to be. And so she did let us know by the 1st. She let us know right at the deadline. And I was like, awesome. But our applications are not short. They're very extensive. And they typically take these teams about a week to fill out. If they work on them just a little bit here and there. I've had a couple of them tell me that they took a whole Saturday and just filled it out. There's a lot of work that's involved in these. And so when I messaged her back the following day, just to check to see how she was doing on the application, to see how in to serving at camp she was actually going to be. And she told me, I've got it filled out. It's in the mail already. Holy cow, this girl worked on it really fast. Well, we did an interview here a week or so ago. And so as we're talking to her, I had to ask, what brought you? What led you to serve at camp again? Because up until March 1st, it was, no, I don't think I'm coming back. It was, I don't know that I want to serve there again. And so I just asked her, what led you to come to camp? She's like, I was just really convicted at church and at school that that's where God wanted me to be. And yeah, so it was cool to watch her work through those things. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, this is what God had planned. And so she went on, and her enthusiasm for how excited she was to have decided that she's coming to serve at camp, like, it made us more excited to have her on staff and to be at camp. Like, it was an awesome conversation to have. And so we're excited for the staff that God has brought and how God has been working behind the scenes. Even though we may not see how God is working, He is working for His ultimate glory. So that's what I have. I don't know how you want me to close. You want me to pray?
Yeah,
you want to
just
pray?
close in prayer. That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
God, I just thank you for this time to be able to come share about our ministry at Victory Center and what you're doing there, what you will continue to do there. I just pray for the campers that are coming this summer, that you would already start working on their hearts, that you would work on the staff hearts, and as well as my family, you would work on my heart and my wife and my kids, just that you would draw us nearer to you. I pray that you would just remind us that even though we may not see what you are doing, and we may not understand why you're waiting, that you would just give us peace, that you are working for your glory, and that your timing is perfect, and that things will work out the way you have designed. It's in your name we pray. Amen.
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 Thank you.